Former President Trump held a rally in South Carolina Saturday. He was ostensibly there to campaign for two Republican primary challengers, but he quickly set his sights on President Biden's handling of the Ukraine invasion.
Despite all of Biden's weakness, cowardice, and incompetence, there is still a path for him to end this tragedy in Ukraine without getting Americans snared in a gruesome and very bloody war, a bloody war. This could lead, by the way, this could lead to World War III. I see what's happening. Because if you think Putin's going to stop, it's going to get worse and worse. He's not going to accept it, and we don't have anybody to talk to him.
Mr. Trump also blasted the Biden administration's response to rising energy prices, and he tore down two Republican incumbents from South Carolina, Nancy Mace and Tom Rice. For more on the rally, I'm joined by CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa. Robert, good to have you with us. You know, there at that rally, we heard the former president say something he said repeatedly: no one was ever tougher on Russia than me. Remind us of then President Trump's relationship with Putin and Russia when he was in office.
It was just in recent days that the former president called Russian President Vladimir Putin smart and savvy. So he's changing his tune when it comes to these recent campaign rallies as Russia's invasion of Ukraine becomes more violent by the day and Ukrainians are suffering on the ground. But he remains someone who's not taken a totally tough line on Putin. This is still a former president who had a relatively warm relationship with the Russian president at different meetings throughout his presidency, despite now claiming he is the toughest person ever when it comes to Russia.
Did the former president have anything to say about Putin's role in the war?
He said that it's time for the United States to now have someone to talk directly to the Russian president, and he said he would be able to do that if he were still in the White House. But this is a message from Trump that has become muddled in recent weeks. Ahead of the midterm elections, Trump's own handling of the Russian invasion is indicative of where the Republican Party is, somewhat confused when it comes to exactly where it's going to stand wholesale on Russia's invasion. At times, they want to run against President Biden as weak in his handling of the invasion and the crisis. At other times, they want to say that Russia should not be a top priority for U.S. foreign policy. This is part of how the former president scattered U.S. Republican thinking when it comes to foreign policy during his presidency and his post-presidency. There's not a coherent hawkish line, as you would expect in recent years, at least from Republicans.
For the most part, Republican leaders have not criticized President Biden's handling of Russia the way that we heard former President Trump speak about it. Is he really out of step with his party on this issue?
On one level, he is out of step. There has been a push for sanctions, more funding for the Ukrainians inside of Congress. Most Republicans have supported that. We saw that in recent days during the vote in both the House and the Senate when it comes to sending billions of dollars, $14 billion over to Ukraine. And a lot of this comes down to how to handle Putin himself. Trump is someone who in past years has just said Putin should be someone the U.S. engages with more. But because of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the gravity of what is happening, you don't hear Trump anymore talking about Putin as, quote, smart or savvy. These are quotes that have somewhat disappeared on the political landscape. But you see in conservative media in particular still an echo of Trump to some extent in terms of how he messages and how they message on Russia.
Another big topic, obviously, whether the former president decides to run again in 2024. What did he have to say about it in South Carolina?
Well, the former president continues to tease the idea. He's not formally announcing a campaign. That would make him have to legally become a candidate, but he's going all the way up to the line. In a sense, based on my reporting, this is freezing the potential Republican field. Others are out there, like former Ambassador Nikki Haley, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former Vice President Mike Pence. They're going to places like Iowa, South Carolina, New Hampshire. But Trump, he looms still over the Republican political landscape for 2024 by holding these rallies in key states like South Carolina. And he's also saying to Republicans across the country, you still need to be loyal to me or I will run against you, or I will support primary challengers like he did on Saturday night in South Carolina. But let's watch in the coming months whether he's successful in having his candidates win primary races.
So, Robert, I did want to ask you about that because the former president is supporting House candidates Katie Arrington and Russell Fry. Tell us what's going on behind that move.
In the days after the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, President Trump, at the time, faced criticism from some Republicans, including House Republicans like Tom Rice of South Carolina, Nancy Mace, another Republican in the House from South Carolina. Trump has taken a stand against those who either voted for his impeachment in the House on the Republican side. You know, one of his main political targets is Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, but also those like Congresswoman Mace, who just offered criticism. He is taking them on in these primary challenges. You see this both on the Senate side, the gubernatorial side, and in the House.
All right, Robert, thank you.